The storm against the sky cracked open like glass. A deep, angry sound rolled across the land. The storm had come. She stood on the edge of the broken city, holding her child tight against her chest. He was so small, so light now. His breath came in weak, shallow gasps. She pressed her lips to his forehead, trying to keep him warm, but nothing could keep the cold away. Above her, black clouds twisted and roared. The wind screamed through the streets, carrying dust and ash. Towers fell one by one, crashing into the ground with a sound like thunder. Fire lit up the horizon dot in the distance. Ships fell from the sky, metal giants with flashing lights. They landed on the burning earth with a heavy thud. Dot. She watched them with wide eyes, her heart beating fast. The humans had arrived. Dot. No one knew why they came. The old stories called them monsters. Soldiers from the stars who destroyed everything in their path. But she didn't care about stories, no. She only cared about the child in her arms. He whimpered softly and turned his face into her shoulder. "Hush, my little one," she whispered. "I am here. I will keep you safe." But even as she spoke, she didn't believe her own words. The ground shook beneath her feet. The storm was growing stronger. She pulled her thin cloak tighter around the child and hurried down into the ruins of the city. Her bare feet slipped on the wet stones. Dust stung her eyes. She moved quickly, ducking into shadows whenever she heard a sound. Behind her, the humans were moving. She could hear their heavy boots and strange weapons buzzing in the air. She didn't dare to look back. She found an old doorway half buried under rubble. The air inside smelled of smoke and earth, but it was dry. She pushed through and crawled into the darkness, clutching the child close. The storm howled outside. Inside the small, dark space, it was quiet. Only the sound of her child's weak breathing filled the air. Dot. She sank to the floor, her legs shaking. Her hands shook too, but she kept stroking the child's hair. "You are strong," she whispered. "You are my brave boy." But he only whimpered again. Tears stung her eyes. She didn't know what to do anymore. The healers were all gone. The city was falling. The humans were here. And the storm. The storm would swallow them all. Dot. A bright light suddenly flashed outside the doorway. She froze. Footsteps followed. Steady, heavy footsteps. They were coming closer. Her breath caught in her throat. She pressed the child tighter to her chest and leaned back into the shadows. Her heart pounded in her ears. The humans, were they here to kill them? She peeked out through a crack in the wall. Dot. A figure appeared in the firelight, tall, covered in dark armor that shone under the storm's flashes. He moved slowly, but with purpose. His helmet hid his face, but she could see his hands, strong and scarred, holding a strange weapon that hummed softly. He stopped and looked around, as if he could feel her watching. She ducked back into the darkness, holding her breath. Footsteps came closer, but then they stopped. Dot. Silence. Dot. She dared to look again. The human stood there, his head tilted, listening to the wind. Then he lifted his weapon and pointed it at the sky. He fired, and a bolt of light shot into the storm. Something above them screamed and fell, a creature with wings like knives. He had not come for her. He had come for something else. Dot. She watched. As he lowered his weapon, his shoulders sinking a little. Even from here, she could see he was tired. His armor was cracked. A dark stain, blood, spread across his side. But still he stood tall. Dot. Still he moved forward. That the storm roared around him, but he did not stop. She didn't understand. The stories said humans were cruel, heartless. But this one, he seemed almost broken. And yet, he kept going. The child stirred in her arms. His tiny hand reached up, touching her cheek. "Mama." He whispered, so faint she almost didn't hear. "Yes, my love," she said softly, tears slipping down her face. Outside, the human disappeared into the storm, walking toward the flames. She stayed hidden, rocking her child back and forth. The wind rattled the walls. The city groaned and fell apart, and still the storm raged on. The human soldier, the wind was alive. It clawed at his face and screamed in his ears. Sand and ash cut through his armor like tiny blades, but he kept walking. His name was no longer important. The storm had taken it from him long ago. Only the mission remained now. His boots sank into the mud of the dying city. Every step felt heavier than the last, but he forced his legs to move. His breath came out in short, sharp clouds inside his helmet. Red lights blinked on his chest, warnings about the damage to his suit. But he ignored them. His hands tightened. On his rifle, the storm had eaten the sun hours ago. The sky was nothing but black clouds and streaks of fire. Buildings fell one by one into the dust. Strange shapes moved in the distance. Creatures of the storm, hunting anything still alive. Didn't care about them. He had faced worse. He moved through the ruins, scanning the shadows. His visor flickered now and then. The screen cracked from the last fight. Even through the static, he could see signs of life, small heat signatures deep in the rubble. But they always vanished before he got closer. His shoulder ached where a blade had pierced his armor earlier. The pain made him clench his teeth, but he welcomed it. Pain meant he was still alive. Pain meant he could keep going. Another building collapsed behind him, sending waves of dust into the air. He didn't even turn to look. He had a mission. Find the child. Save it. The others had called him a fool. "We don't risk our lives for them," the captain had said. But he'd gone anyway. He thought of Earth sometimes, of blue skies and warm light, of quiet forests and the sound of birds. He wondered if he would ever see it again, but there was no time for thoughts like that now. Something moved ahead of him. He stopped, his visor focused on the shadow, a creature taller than a man, with long claws and eyes like burning coals. It crouched on top of a broken tower, watching him. He raised his rifle slowly. The creature leapt, silent and fast. He fired. The shot lit up the darkness for a second, and the creature screamed as it fell into the dust. Its body writhed before, finally going still. He didn't move toward it. He didn't need to. He could already hear more of them coming. He kept walking. The storm grew louder, as if it was angry at him for surviving. But he walked on anyway. He passed the remains of what must have been a market. Broken stalls, shattered glass, toys lying, forgotten in the mud. He knelt for a moment and picked up a small carved animal, a child's toy. Its paint was faded, but it was still whole. He stared at it in his hand for a long time before slipping it into his pocket. Then he moved on ahead. A narrow street led deeper into the ruins. He could feel eyes on him now, dozens of them, watching. From the darkness, he raised his rifle but didn't fire. They were waiting for him to get tired, to fall, but he wouldn't. Not yet. He pushed forward, his body screaming in protest. Then he heard it. A sound so soft he thought he imagined it. At first, a song. It floated through the air, faint but clear, a gentle melody that somehow rose above. The roar of the storm. He froze. It was impossible. The sound was beautiful. His visor flickered again, struggling to locate the source. But he didn't need it. He could feel the song pulling him forward. He followed it through the broken streets, through fire and falling stone. Every step closer, the song grew louder. He didn't understand the words, but they sounded sad and strong. And familiar. Lowered his rifle, his eyes scanning the shadows. There, a narrow opening in the rubble. Faint light spilled out, and the song came from inside. He moved closer, slowly. The ground here was uneven, and he almost stumbled when another blast of wind hit him. He caught himself on the edge of the doorway and peered inside Dot in the darkness. He saw her Dot, an alien woman, sitting on the cold floor, cradling a child in her arms. She was singing to it, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Her face was streaked with ash and tears. Her body shook with exhaustion, but she didn't stop. He froze. Watching her Dot, the child coughed weakly and pressed its face into her chest. She looked up then and saw him. For a moment, everything was silent. Even the storm outside seemed to hold its breath. Her eyes widened. She pulled the child closer, her body tense like a cornered animal. His hands tightened on his weapon, but he didn't raise it. Dot instead. He just stood there. She stared at him, her song fading into silence. The child whimpered softly. He didn't move. She didn't either. The storm screamed outside, but inside the little room, time seemed to stop. He looked down at his rifle, then back at her Dot, and slowly, very slowly, he lowered it. The woman blinked, surprised. Her arms tightened protectively around the child. He took one small step closer. She flinched. He stopped, holding up one hand, palm open. His other hand dropped the rifle onto the floor with a soft clatter. The woman's breathing quickened, but she didn't run. He knelt, keeping his hands where she could see them. Dot, and then, for the first time in a long time, he spoke. I can help. His voice was rough, cracked from the dry air. Dot, she just stared at him, her eyes full of fear. And something else. Dot, hope. The song in the dark storm outside grew worse. Wind howled like a living beast, and the city groaned under its weight. Walls cracked, stones fell, and fire lit the skies in flashes. But inside the dark ruin, there was silence. The human soldier knelt on the cold floor, his rifle lying harmless in the dust. The alien woman still held her child tight against her chest, her breath fast and sharp. Dot, her wide eyes stared at him, waiting, ready to fight if he moved closer. He did not move. Instead, he stayed there, one knee on the ground, his hands open where she could see. His helmet hid his face, but his body was still, his voice quiet. I can help, he had said. Dot, but she didn't believe him. Not yet. Dot, the child stirred weakly in her arms, letting out a dry, soft cough. She glanced down at him, brushing her fingers across his cheek. His skin was pale, his eyes half closed. Her heart ached. Dot, then she looked back at the human. Dot, he hadn't moved. Not an inch. Dot, only his chest rose and fell, slow but heavy. The red lights on his armor still blinked, wounded, damaged, but he stayed steady. The woman tightened her arms around her child and spoke for the first time, her voice low and hoarse. Why? The human tilted his head slightly. She swallowed. Why, you here? He stayed quiet for a moment, as though thinking about her question. Then he said, simply, Storm will kill you. Others will kill you. I won't. His words were broken, strange. But she understood. Outside, a sharp noise cut through the air. Claws on stone, a high-pitched screech. The creatures of the storm were near again. The woman's body, T-E-N-S-E-D. That human stood slowly, his armor groaning with the effort. He picked up his rifle, but kept it pointed at the ground. Dot. Then something strange happened. The woman began to sing again. Dot, soft at first, so quiet it was almost lost in the wind. But then it grew louder, filling the little space between them. Dot, the human, froze, listening. The song was not just sound. It was feeling, sorrow and strength. A melody older than the city itself, full of pain and love at the same time. The child, quieted in her arms, his breathing calmer now as her voice wrapped around him like a blanket. The human felt it too, though he didn't understand the words. He felt something in his chest tighten. Memories of Earth came unbidden, of his mother humming to him when he was a boy, of stars above his home, of soft rain falling on green fields. For a moment, he forgot the storm, the pain in his side, the mission. There was only the song, Dot, but the peace didn't last, Dot. A sudden roar shattered the moment. The woman stopped singing, her body rigid. The human snapped around, rifle up, Dot. From the shadows beyond the doorway, they came. Creatures of the storm, tall, hunched beasts with long arms and claws that scraped the walls. Their eyes glowed orange, their bodies like black smoke and steel. They moved quickly, crawling over the rubble. Dozens of them, Dot. The woman cried out and backed deeper into the dark. The human stepped forward, blocking the entrance, his rifle steady. Stay. Back, he growled, Dot, but the creatures didn't stop. One lunged at him. He fired. The flash lit up the room as the creature's body shattered into ash, Dot. Another jumped. From the side, he caught it with his arm and slammed it into the wall, then shot it through the head. But more and more kept coming. The woman clutched her child and watched, her eyes wide with fear, and something else, awe. The human fought like a storm himself, every movement sharp and precise. His rifle barked fire again and again, and when it ran empty, he swung it like a club, knocking one creature to the ground before stomping on its chest. But they clawed at him too. His armor cracked under their strikes, blood darkening the metal. His helmet visor shattered on one side, sparks spraying as it failed. Still he fought. Still he stood between them and her, Dot. The creature screamed and hissed, circling, looking for a way around him. And then she began to sing again, Dot, louder this time. The melody rose above the chaos, filling the air with power. The creatures faltered. Some slowed, their movements confused, their claws lowering, Dot. The human heard it too. He felt his strength return, his focus sharpen. He drove his shoulder into one beast and sent it tumbling back into the others. He grabbed another by the throat and threw it into the wall so hard it broke apart. The woman's song grew even louder. The creatures howled and began to retreat, crawling back into the storm, their glowing eyes blinking out one by one. Finally, silence. Dot. The human stood there, his shoulders rising and falling, his armor smoking, blood dripping from his side. He looked back at the woman. She held the child tightly, her song slowing into a whisper. Their eyes met. He gave a small nod, just once, before collapsing to one knee, breathing hard. She watched him for a long moment before stepping forward, still wary, but no longer afraid. The storm outside still raged, but in that dark room, only the soft echo of her song remained. And the human, though broken and bleeding, stayed between her and the door. Like a shield, Dot, like hope. That risk-faced to foresee the storm outside was quieter now, but only a little. The sky still groaned and burned with orange fire. The wind still screamed through broken streets, carrying dust and ash, Dot, inside the ruin. They stood in silence. The human soldier leaned against the wall, his breath heavy and uneven. His armor was cracked and smoking. Blood ran in thin, dark lines down his neck. His visor was gone now, one half shattered, the other hanging loose from his helmet. He had dropped his rifle some time ago. It lay on the floor, forgotten. But his eyes? They were still sharp, still alive, and they were watching her. The alien woman stood on the other side of the room, her back pressed to the wall, her child in her arms. Her song had faded to nothing now, but its memory still hung in the air like smoke. She could hear her own heartbeat, fast, uneven. Dot. The human didn't move toward her. Not yet. He stayed where he was, crouched slightly, one hand pressed to his side where the armor was broken. But his gaze never left her face. She swallowed, shifting her weight as the child whimpered and stirred. Outside, the storm growled and spat fire, but inside, the silence was heavier than the wind. Finally, slowly, he stood straighter. She flinched, holding the child tighter, as if her thin arms could shield him from whatever was about to happen. But the human didn't attack Dot instead. He lifted one hand, palm open, fingers spread, a gesture she didn't understand at first. But his voice, low and rough, followed. "Safe," he said. She narrowed her eyes. He tried again, his words broken but clear. "You safe. With me." The words felt strange, heavy with something she couldn't name. She looked down at the child. His small face was pale, his breath shallow, but he watched the human too. And her eyes rose to the human again. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. He was quiet for a long time. Then he took a slow step closer. She froze. He stopped when he saw her body stiffen. He raised both hands now, showing he carried nothing. Then he said, in a voice so soft it surprised her, "Because I remember." She blinked. He took another step. "Earth," he said, pointing faintly toward the burning sky, though the stars were hidden now. "Home," he added after a pause. His hands lowered slightly as he struggled for words. "Storms. There, too. Wars, fire. We survived because someone stayed to protect." His gaze fell briefly to the child in her arms, then back to her eyes. "Like you." She stared at him, the words strange in her ears, but full of meaning. Then she noticed something she hadn't before. His eyes. They weren't hard like the stories said. Not cruel. They were tired, full of pain. But also something else. Determination. She dared to speak again. "Why?" "Me?" He tilted his head slightly. Then, after a long pause, he said, "Because no one else did." And with that, he dropped to one knee in front of her. She gasped softly, unsure what he was doing. He reached into a small pouch on his chest and pulled something out. A small metal device, cracked but still glowing faintly. He set it on the ground between them and pushed it toward her. "For him," he said simply, nodding toward the child. She glanced down at the device, then back up at him. "What is it?" she asked carefully. He took a slow breath. He said. Then, with great effort, he removed his helmet completely and let it fall to the floor. She saw his face for the first time. It was scarred. His skin was pale, smeared with blood and ash. A long cut ran from his cheek to his jaw, still bleeding. But his eyes, though tired, burned with quiet fire. He looked almost human. The room was quiet, except for the faint sound of the child breathing and the distant storm. The woman reached out, her hand hovering over the strange device. But before she could touch it, a loud noise exploded outside, a sound sharper than the wind or the beast's. The human's head snapped up instantly. He stood, grabbing his rifle from the floor without thinking. Then another sound, closer this time. He moved to the doorway, motioning for her to stay back. "Hunters," he said. Voice flat but full of warning. She felt her stomach twist. The hunters. Not like him. Not like the creatures. Worse. Shadows moved outside, fast, sharp, deliberate. She felt the air grow colder. The human looked back at her one last time. "Stay," he ordered, pointing at the ground. Then he stepped outside into the storm, clutched the child tightly, and crawled to the edge of the doorway to watch. The street outside was alive with movement now. Tall, dark figures in heavy armor, their weapons glowing blue. They fanned out in a circle, closing in. The human didn't back down. He stood straight, his rifle ready. One of the hunters shouted something in a language she didn't know. The human didn't answer. Instead, he fired. Light exploded, blinding and loud. The hunters moved as one. Fast, precise. Weapons hissed, cutting through the air. The human spun, ducked, shot again. One hunter fell. Then another, but there were too many. They rushed him, striking from all sides. She saw him stumble, but not fall. He fought like the storm itself, wild but controlled. Every strike aimed to protect the doorway behind him. Her song rose in her throat, unbidden. She began to sing again, louder than before, her voice carrying over the roar of the battle. Hunters hesitated, confused by the sound. The human used that moment, striking 2 more down before the others regrouped. She kept singing, tears running down her cheeks as her voice filled the dark streets. The hunters faltered again. The human turned his head, slightly, just for a second, and their eyes met. She saw it then. He was smiling. Broken, bleeding, surrounded, but smiling. And then he charged into them, his rifle blazing, her song still ringing in the air. Face to face with death. And he didn't flinch. The enemy arrived storm had teeth now. It bit into the city, tearing roofs from buildings, throwing stones like knives. The fire in the sky was closer, angrier. It painted everything in red and black. And still, he stood. The human soldier's rifle was gone, broken somewhere in the dust. But his hands were not empty. One held a jagged piece of metal, sharp enough to cut. His other hand was bloody but steady, ready to strike. He stood in the middle of the shattered street, his body swaying slightly, his armor torn open, his breath loud and ragged. Around him, the hunters circled like wolves. Their dark armor shimmered faintly with alien light, their weapons buzzing low like distant thunder. But they didn't rush him yet. They just watched. Waiting. Inside the doorway behind him, the woman clutched her child close. Her song had stopped now. Her throat burned from singing, her chest heavy. But her voice still echoed faintly in the air, like the ghost of something holy. She didn't dare step outside. She could only watch. The human spat blood into the dust and straightened his back. His eyes burned with quiet fire, even though his legs shook beneath him. "Come," he growled. One of the hunters stepped forward, taller than the others, its weapon longer, sharper. A leader, she thought. Its voice came out like cold metal scraping stone. "You are alone," it hissed. The human tilted his head slightly, his cracked lips twisting into something like a smile. "So are you," he answered. The hunter paused. Then it raised its weapon and pointed it at him. And the others followed. All at once, they moved. Blinding light flashed as weapons fired. Streaks of blue and white cut through the storm. The human ducked, rolled, and lunged at the closest hunter. His jagged blade sank deep into its chest, and it fell with a soundless scream. But another struck him from behind. He staggered forward, coughing, but spun and drove his blade into its throat before it could strike again. They swarmed him now. Blows rained down on him. Claws, blades, kicks, but he didn't fall. He caught a weapon in midair, wrenching it away and swinging it in a wide arc, knocking 3 hunters back, but more kept coming. The woman pressed her hand over her mouth, her heart pounding so loud she could hear nothing else. She felt the child stir weakly in her arms, his eyes fluttering open, and then a sound cut through the storm, different from the rest, a deep, rhythmic thump. The ground began to tremble under her feet. The hunters froze. Even the humans stopped and looked up. From the darkness beyond the street, something massive moved, a shape bigger than any building left standing. Its legs were like pillars of black iron. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed red like twin suns. A war machine. The enemy's final weapon. She felt her breath catch in her throat. The hunters stepped back, giving space as the giant thing approached. Its footsteps shook the stones loose from the walls. dust falling in clouds. The human didn't move. His chest rose and fell slowly. He dropped the jagged blade and stood up straight, staring at the machine as it loomed closer. Hunter barked something at the machine. A signal dot it stopped just 10 paces away. Its head tilted slightly, as if it was studying the human dot. Then a voice came from it. Low, mechanical, cruel. You cannot win. It said dot the human's mouth, curved into a small smile. Not here to win, he said quietly. Dot the machine tilted its head again. Then why do you stand? The human's eyes flicked back toward the doorway, toward her. He didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, so softly she almost didn't hear, because they can't. The machine's chest opened with a hiss of steam. Inside, a weapon began to glow, brighter and brighter, a swirling core of deadly light. She could feel the heat from here. She tightened her grip on her child and pressed herself deeper into the shadows. The human didn't flinch. He took a single step forward, his hands clenched into fists. Dot. The machine's weapon whined as it charged. Dot. And then the woman began to sing again. Her voice was cracked and weak, but it carried through the storm like an arrow. Soft at first, then louder, stronger. The hunters hesitated. The machine's glow faltered slightly. The human's head turned just a little, his eyes meeting hers. Then he moved, faster than she thought possible. He lunged at the machine, grabbing onto its lower frame. The hunters shouted, firing at him, but he climbed higher, pulling himself up with bleeding hands. The machine roared, swinging one massive arm to knock him off, but he held on, climbing toward the glowing core. She sang louder, her voice shaking the walls now. The hunters fell back, covering their ears, confused by the strange power in her song. The machine staggered as the human reached its chest. He ripped away a plate of armor, exposing wires and lights beneath. The machine's voice rose, angry and afraid. You cannot. But it was too late. The human slammed his hand into the core, and light exploded outward. Everything went white. The air split open with sound. And then silence. When her eyes cleared, the machine was lying in pieces, smoking and broken. The hunters had scattered, running into the shadows. And the human lay in the dust, still and silent. She stood frozen for a moment. Then she stepped outside, her feet bare against the cold stones. She walked to him slowly, the child quiet in her arms. He was lying on his back, his armor completely shattered now, his hands burned and bloody. But his chest still moved, barely. His eyes opened just a little as she knelt beside him. She sang again, soft now, just for him, and he smiled faintly through cracked lips. Told you, he whispered, his voice breaking. You're safe. Then his eyes closed, and the storm began to break, light returning to the sky for the first time. The last stand the light in the sky was faint now, like a memory of something lost. Ashes still fell from above, soft as snow, covering the ruins in gray, and the wind carried the smell of smoke and blood. But the storm was finally quiet. The woman knelt on the ground, her child asleep in her arms, his tiny chest rising and falling slowly. Beside her, the human soldier lay motionless, his body half buried in the dust. His armor was nothing but shattered pieces clinging to him. His hands were blackened and bloody, his face pale, lips cracked, but she could see it. His chest still moved, barely, and his eyes opened again, just a little. She leaned closer. Don't move, she whispered. Her voice shook. You did it. Machine gone. Hunters gone. Storm gone. But his head moved side to side slowly. His breath rattled in his chest. His voice, when it came, was broken. Not over. She froze. Then she heard a two-dot a sound, deep, low, rising from beneath the ground, like something huge. Awakening. She looked up, her heart sinking. Far beyond the ruins, a black shape rose against the faint light of dawn. It was even bigger than the last machine, a tower of metal and hate, its eyes glowing brighter than the sun. It stepped forward, and the earth cracked under its feet. Her stomach twisted with fear. The human pushed himself up, slowly, painfully. He groaned as he rolled onto his side, his hands clawing at the ground. She tried to stop him. "No," she cried. "You can't fight. Too hurt." But he shook his head again. "Must." And then he did something she didn't expect. He reached toward her and held out his hand. In his palm was the small device he had given her earlier. It glowed faintly now, weaker than before. "Take him," he whispered, nodding to the child. Her hands trembled as she took it. He pushed himself further up, using what little strength was left to stand on one knee. Then he planted one foot, then the other, and somehow stood. He swayed like a dying tree in the wind, but did not fall. His eyes, though tired, though full of pain, still burned. The great machine roared in the distance, a sound so loud the stones shook. It raised one arm, and the air began to hum with deadly energy. She felt her knees weaken. She looked at the human. But he didn't look back at her. He was already walking. Step by step through the dust and ash toward the monster. She stood there, clutching her child, watching him move into the dawn. The machine fired. A beam of blinding light ripped through the city, carving a path of fire and destruction. But he kept moving. His body glowed faintly now, as if something inside him had woken up. The closer he got, the brighter he seemed to burn. He reached the center of the broken square. Directly beneath the machine. It paused. Almost curious, he looked up at it. Then he tore what was left of his chest plate off and slammed his fist into a panel on his side. His body flashed with light so bright it turned night into day. The woman gasped and shielded the child's eyes. Was burning now, flames that were not flames, power spilling from his body in waves. The machine roared and raised its other arm, firing again, but the beam shattered against the light around him. He ran. Faster than before. Each step cracked the stones beneath him. The ground shook as he leapt upward, grabbing hold of the machine's lower frame. It swiped at him, but he climbed higher. His hands left marks of fire where he touched it, metal melting beneath his grip. He reached its chest, where the core of its power pulsed. The woman's breath caught in her throat. He glanced back just once, and their eyes met, and then he smiled, a smile full of defiance, full of quiet pride, full of something she did not have a word for. And then he drove his fist into the machine's core. Light erupted, brighter than anything she had ever seen. The ground split open. The machine screamed a horrible metallic sound before it fell backward, its body breaking apart as it collapsed into the ruins. The sky exploded into color, red and gold and white. The storm finally broke for good, and dawn poured down on the city like a blessing. She blinked against the light. When it faded, the machine was nothing but a smoking skeleton, and the human lay at its feet. She ran to him, bare feet cut on sharp stones, but she didn't stop. The child clung weakly to her as she dropped to her knees beside him. He lay in the dust, his body still glowing faintly, cracks of light running through his skin like veins. She touched his cheek. His eyes opened one last time, and she began to sing. Soft and low. Her voice carried on the morning wind. Over the ruins, over the broken streets. He smiled faintly at the Jing sound, his lips moving silently. She leaned closer to hear Dot, and he whispered, "Worth it." His eyes closed, and the light in his body faded slowly. His chest stilled, but his smile remained. She knelt there for a long time, her song rising and falling, her tears mixing with the dust. And when the sun finally rose, golden and warm, she stood. She held her child close, the small device still glowing faintly in her hand, and she looked down at the human one last time, not a soldier, a shield, a storm. And now, a quiet hero. Dot. Then she turned and walked into the light of the new day, her voice still singing softly behind her. Asterisk, a new dawn sun, finally rose over the broken world. But it was not the same sun she remembered. Dot, it was softer now. Warm. Golden light spread slowly over the ruins, filling the streets with quiet fire. The black smoke from the battle still curled into the air, but it thinned more with every passing breath. The storm was gone, the hunters were gone. And he was gone too. Dot. She stood there for a long time, the child asleep against her chest, watching the place where he lay. His body was still, yet it seemed larger somehow, not just a soldier now, but something greater. The light inside him had faded, but its warmth remained in the stones around him, in the air itself. She bent down and touched his hand one last time. Cold now, but she could still feel the strength that had carried him through the storm. Her lips moved without sound. A prayer. Or maybe just a promise. Then she rose and looked to the horizon, and she saw it, faint but real, a shape in the sky, moving toward them. A ship, huge silver, cutting through the clouds with slow grace. Human markings glinted on its hull as it descended. For a moment, her heart stopped. Was it more soldiers? More hunters? Or something else? She held the child tighter and stepped back into the shadows, but the ship did not fire. Its engines roared as it drew closer, and then it hovered above the square where the human had made his last stand. A bright beam of white light shot down from its belly, illuminating the wreck of the great machine and the ruins around it. She watched, breathless, and then figures appeared at the edge of the light. Human figures, soldiers, but different from him. Their armor was whole and clean, their weapons polished. They moved with precision, but not with violence. One of them stopped and knelt beside the human's body. The others fanned out, scanning the area. One of them spoke into a device. His voice carried faintly to her. Found him. Mission complete. The words meant nothing to her, but the tone was heavy. Not victory. Something more like respect. The humans began to work quickly. One of them, a tall figure with a red mark on his shoulder, stood at the edge of the light, looking into the shadows. His eyes swept over the rubble, and for a moment she thought he saw her, but he didn't call out. He simply looked and nodded, as though he knew she was there. Then he turned back to the others. She stayed hidden, clutching the child, her body tense. But the humans did not come closer. They lifted the fallen soldier carefully and placed him onto a stretcher that glowed faintly at the edges. 4 of them carried him into the beam of light. And slowly the ship began to rise. Her breath caught as she watched. The wind whipped around her as the engines roared louder. Dust and ash swirled into the air, stinging her eyes, but still she watched. Ship climbed higher, the humans disappearing inside, and then, just before the beam faded, one of them turned. A figure at the back of the group. His helmet tilted slightly, and his hand rose. A small gesture, open-PALMED. Just like the soldier had done when he first found her. She stared, her heart beating fast. And then the light vanished, and the ship rose into the clouds. Gone. The square fell silent. Only the wind remained, soft now, gentle. She stood there in the morning light, her eyes fixed on the sky. The child stirred weakly in her arms. His small hand reached up, touching her cheek. She looked down and smiled faintly, though her eyes were wet. He would live now, because of the human. Because of his storm. She began to walk, her bare feet pressing into the soft dust. The sun warmed her skin as she moved through the ruins, her cloak fluttering lightly behind her. Each step felt strange, like the world was new beneath her. Like she was walking not just through a city, but into something bigger. She passed the place where the great machine had fallen. Its body was cracked and silent now, smoke rising faintly from its shattered core. Birds, real birds, circled above it now, as if claiming it back for the earth. She passed broken walls painted with strange symbols she didn't understand. She passed empty streets that no longer felt like traps, but like memories. And all the while, she sang. Not the sad, heavy song she had sung before, but something lighter now, something that carried hope with it. Her voice rose into the air, blending with the morning breeze. It echoed softly off the stones, filling the silence with warmth. At the edge of the city, she stopped. There, the land opened wide, rolling hills touched by dawn's gold light. Flowers, fragile and brave, poked through cracks in the earth, reaching toward the sun. She took a deep breath and looked back one last time. Behind her, the city still smoldered. The scars of the battle still burned into its bones. But above it, the sky was clear, blue and endless. She whispered something, a word she didn't know in his language, but she'd heard him say it once, home. Then she turned and began to walk down the hill. The child stirred again, opening his eyes just enough to see the bright sky. She kissed his forehead softly. Safe, she said, using his word this time. You are safe. And for the first time, in many storms, she believed it. As she walked, the sun rose higher, and the city behind her grew smaller. But the memory of him, the human, stayed with her. His strength, his fire, his last stand. And though he was gone, his light was still. Here in her, in the child, in the quiet song that floated on the wind, she did not stop singing. She did not stop walking. And somewhere, high above the clouds, where the stars began again, another ship carried him home. A hero, not just to his kind, but to hers too. A human, who fought through the storm, and left the dawn behind him.